Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to the Doctor's Lab. It's been a long time, and we've been listening and hearing from you across the globe, and we're back. We want to thank Stream Islam for getting the show back on the road, as they say. And I will just immediately go back to a brother I've not spoken to for a while, actually. Dr. Khalid, welcome back. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And it's a pleasure to be back. It's a pleasure to be back in action and hopefully give some something that the people can chew on, so to speak. Now,
Absolutely. I think we're going to have some topics, as always, that we will have discussions on. And as I was saying to you before, Dr. Khalid, Brother Khalid, one of the beauties of what we are doing, I think the importance here is where we see the internecine disputes amongst co-religionists as us as Salafis, if we're looking from a microcosmic perspective of the Ummah, and we see that backwards and forwards, and we know how it's gone over the years. We don't need to go over it here, and the character assassinations and the disputes and everything. I hope that this is one of those spaces where individuals can see that despite us having differences in particular perspectives, okay, we've had that, and we've discussed it on the Doctor's Lab, and we've disagreed openly, but we haven't disagreed in the areas of usul, okay, in Aqidah, and also despite some of the differences, which can be, you and I have laughed afterwards and everything like that, the love and the brotherhood is what prevails. Seeking Allah's pleasure, seeking knowledge. We will disagree in some areas where you will have more knowledge than me from a dini point as a talib al-ilm in that instance. And maybe from my lack of knowledge in that regard, I have a different perspective. Or we may have the same knowledge on a particular issue, not maybe dini, but we're talking about furu, and furu is deen, subsidiary matters are deen, but on a furu, on a subsidiary matter. But the important thing is that we come together as brothers, we part as brothers, and we love each other for Allah's sake. There's not that hatred and bitterness. And we've had our detractors on your side against me, from my side against you. Not that we're on sides, but those who contact us on social media and sites and stuff. So I think it's really important to put that out there at this particular stage, so that the audience, viewers, can see that yes, Salafiyah as the truth is unquestionable. But as Salafis, we often fall short of what we're aspiring to. Would you agree with me on that? And I want to say salams, Octavia, Kira, Bilal, welcome back. Gaza, salams. I'll hand it to you, Khalid.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Also to the people, may Allah bless, put barakah in this gathering. No doubt that how to deal with differences is critical. And actually, I don't exactly think we're doing something super unique, because we've seen the example of many of the scholars that they've differed. Many Salafi scholars, like Imams, like Imam al-Albani, Imam Muqbil, Imam bin Baz, differing, for example, over the fatwa of allowing the Americans in Saudi Arabia. That was a thing of contention between Salafi scholars, and none of them slandered the other one's character. They all regarded one another as imams. So I don't think those are the way my tasawwur, my view is that for number one, it's impossible to agree on all issues. And I'm not talking about aside from the deen. The deen, we have to come back to the Quran and the Sunnah. You know, that's what forms our judgment, and that's our basis. But there's going to be so many issues and masail and different approaches that requires maybe some ijtihad and some reasoning, some qiyas and some things. And as you said, our shortcomings, we all have shortcomings, and we're shortcomings even in our methodology. We're trying our best to practice the book and the Sunnah according to the methodology of the Salaf. So we're going to have those shortcomings, but also a critical problem we've had, even though this is going to open up another topic and then we'll close the door real quick. And what we've both lived through and seen is a lot of our brothers and sisters on the Dawah have not learned the tools on how to differ. And one of the reasons for that is also some of the scholars did not either teach or illustrate and exemplify that example. We see from a lot of the major scholars, we do see that. But then some of our other scholars, which we still respect and we may have called, we may have sat with, we may listen to, may have their books, but we don't see that example. And that's why we've had so many fighting instead of learning how to deal with those issues in a really going back to the deen, because we shouldn't rush, as many of the scholars have written books, don't rush to take the people, someone who's usul and their methodology and their aqidah is that of the methodology of the Salaf. Don't rush. It's not easy to just take them off the sunnah. And this is part of the problem. So yeah, that's kind of outside of our scope, but I guess it's an introduction to, our topic.
There. And when I say unique, I'm talking, obviously, the scholars there, the precedents have been set, as you said, with regards to the ethics of disagreement and things like this. I'm saying from a Western perspective and from the community that we herald from, because we know only too well what these problems are. And if anyone's wondering about the lighting adjustments here, it's the sun setting in the horizons there, so get used to that, inshallah, for now, but alhamdulillah. But so Khalid, no, mashallah, tabarakallah, it is good to be back. I think, and I believe that we raised the level of discussion in this sort of forum around issues that were relevant. I'm talking about the past sessions. I know that there are those who contact me now who are still going over some of the sessions, studying some of the sessions and everything. And may Allah place that in our deeds, a scale of good deeds, Ameen. And also those brothers and sisters who have been participating and are returning as well, mashallah. So let's jump into the source, as you Americans say, okay? No. The subject of reverts and trauma, or converts and trauma. I use reverts and converts interchangeably, mashallah.
I do as well.
Good. I'm glad we can agree on that.
I'm not blind, because I read some interesting articles, and not to interject, but where some people took quite an exception to saying reverts, and they gave their argumentation. So I understood. I understand their perspective, but I'm fluid with that, because we know what's meant. We know what's meant.
Yeah. And I think so. Reverts, converts, and trauma, challenges of identity and belonging. Now, I'm going to hand over to you to touch upon what you want to elucidate upon in that regard, and then I will come in and give a perspective, which I think there's a lot that we're going to synergize on around these experiences, being converts ourselves.
Jamil, beautiful. The funny thing is, as usual, I was waiting for you to lead into the topic. Then I was going to, but I did, alhamdulillah, I did prepare something, because when thinking about this topic, I think we were probably in the same realm. We were probably thinking of some of the same issues and going in a certain direction. However, I was thinking, well, trauma. Do we face trauma? So I think it's about a definition of terms. Let's get into that so we don't get too much off point. So some of the things that I came across: a traumatic event is one in which an individual experiences, witnesses, or is confronted with actual or threatened death, serious injury, or threat to their physical well-being. Emotional trauma caused by events such as sexual and physical violence, akramakumullah, emotional abuse or neglect, natural disasters, serious accidents, acts of war, terrorism can shatter an individual's sense of security. Let me see what's important here. It is not the objective facts. This was something I highlighted here. It is not the objective facts that determine whether an event is traumatic, but a person's subjective emotional experience of the event. I thought that was a really nice little synopsis, because what one person may find is traumatic, another person may it's subjective, how they emotionally handle it. Someone could have the same experience. They could be raised by parents that beat them with sticks and throw them in a bathtub with glass and all this kind of crazy stuff. And of course, they're going to be affected, but they may not be affected like someone else who's traumatized very severely by that. So I just wanted to get that out as far as a little bit about the terms. And obviously, then when we're talking about emotional trauma and things like this, we're then moving on to how to heal from that. So when it relates to as a revert, and of course, I always think of your PhD, the funnel, which I'm sure you're going to get into because it's so relevant to our topic. But for example, my experience in becoming and coming to Islam, it wasn't really through necessarily people's dawah. It was my research. I was really into, at the time, Black nationalism. I used to go to some of the Nation Islam meetings. Of course, I read Malcolm X's autobiography, huge impact on my life, and other factors. And then I met some Muslims through work and other places, and I eventually ended up at the masjid and embraced Islam. For me, there was nothing. My family is pretty open, no real trauma, but there's a lot of people who experience a whole different experience. So that trauma could be in embracing Islam and then how the family reacts to them, or just there could be trauma, I guess, accepting, as it says, challenges of identity and belonging, because there's quite a transformation. When I accepted Islam, I had my dreads. Dreads were on my shoulders for the first few years in Islam, and you could never tell me to cut my lion's mane. No way. It was not happening. You're going to get it. So I kept my dreads until some time of my own development, and that's that maturing and all those phases that I'm sure you're going to get into. So I think for reverts, it's it is quite an experience. It's going to vary from person to person as far as trauma. But I think probably what I believe, going to get into is just the experience of acceptance into the new community, and feelings of alienation, feelings of, when Eid comes around and no one invites you, and so forth. And that's, they're going through those phases. And also myself personally, being known in a greater community, especially in Washington State, for example. So I can navigate. I'm known, I'm respected. I can go do khutbahs in different places. So they see me more as in a leadership position, or a, what have you, doing dawah and things like this. But still, for a lot of my brothers and sisters, they don't have that. And even some who've been pillars in the community for many years, because they don't have that same role, there's still there can be alienation and so forth. And, we could just go on and on and on, but we'll get into it. And I just want to mention a last point, because we're just basically touching some of these issues, is right now, currently, I work with some brothers who are incarcerated, and they're mainly Mexican. Okay. It's most of the brothers there, the converts or reverts, they're Hispanic, or I shouldn't say they're Mexican, but they're Mexican American, they're Hispanic, Latino X, or whatever you call it, and so forth. So, the brothers, they can relate a lot to the African American experience, but also their own unique cultural experience. But there's a lot of similarities. And I try to tell them, because the brothers, a lot of them, they're tatted all over their face, Bismillah on the forehead, on the eyelid, things like this. May Allah bless us and preserve them. And, I tell them, hey, when you get out and you get into the community, you do have to understand there's going to be a lot of people in some of these communities, especially because the communities around these areas are going to be generally people who are born Muslim, that are immigrant communities. They're not going to look at you the same. They're not going to really accept you. So I just want you to prepare for that. I don't want you to run away from your deen. You need to be with people who are going to help strengthen your iman. But, I just try to prepare them for that, because that can make people get lost very quickly, and especially these guys have a double, the additional challenges with being incarcerated, and being under the microscope, and then being obvious, not just incarcerated, but it's almost incarcerated on their face and in their body, because they're all tatted up. So those are big challenges of coming into the community. How do you come into the community? Even if you wanted to assimilate to the community, it would be very hard. You know, people are going to be suspicious of you. And we could go into stories about that as well, but I'm going to turn it over to you.
No, I appreciate that, Khalid. I appreciate that insight that you're giving there. I think I'm going to revisit, as you've said, there's some frameworks that I developed and tested in my PhD, tested and used them globally since then, and they've found resonance with many communities and institutions that I've interacted with, born out of our experiences, some of which you've shared now. So my cognitive development framework was a 4-stage model, is a 4-stage model, and it's conducive to conversion theory as well. When we look at other academics even from other faiths when they've studied this. So the first one, as you know, was the founding stage, that very initial stage where there's an awakening. There's if you're a non-observant Muslim, you suddenly become observant again because of various factors around you. If you were formerly a non-Muslim, like ourselves and some of the examples that you've cited, you have this cognitive awakening. Allah's guided you to Islam, and you are consciously deciding to embrace that faith. That's a very vulnerable phase, and it's a very abstract phase because everything is around idealism. Then we move to the second stage, which, as you know, is the youthful phase. Again, an abstract stage, but that is of activism and idealism again, and wanting to change the world and preach the message of Islam to all and sundry. And there's maybe the enthusiasm and the overzealousness is what comes across to the recipient of that message, and it can be quite stifling and off-putting in that instance. But those first 2 stages are abstract stages. They're idealistic stages. They're miscontextualized stages. And the important thing is to move to the 3rd and 4th stages, and to move individuals to the 3rd and 4th stages. The 3rd one being the adult stage, where you're starting to contextualize your practice, reflecting on the first 2 stages, the level of idealism that you had, and a pragmatism starts to set in at this particular stage. You've maybe married, you've maybe traveled, you've maybe had children now. You're contextualizing this belief, this ideology, this deen, the way of life that you've brought on board has come into your life. And then the 4th stage, which is the stage of wisdom, that mature stage, where not only are you able to reflect and modify and adjust your practices, you've learned so much in this instance now that you're contextualizing and imparting your experiences or the maturity and the knowledge to others. So these last 2 stages, the 3rd and 4th, the adult and mature stage, they are actually periods of actualization. So now coming back to the reverts and or converts, as it were. Let's start with the first stage. We've got to remember that many of us come to the deen with trauma. And if I bring, for example, the hadith of the man who killed 99 plus 1, killed 100 people. Whilst he killed those individuals, there was a trauma upon him of being a murderer of so many people. And the advice he was given was to make hijrah to another land, to travel to another land. Okay? And he wanted to be upon goodness, righteousness, and everything. And we see the dispute between the angels, whether he got closer to the land of hijrah and therefore forgiveness, or was he closer to what the land he'd come from, warranting punishment. And we know the narration is there, mashallah, tabarakallah. The point I'm making by bringing this is that when we convert, when we revert and enter the deen, we are making a journey away from things from the past. And it doesn't all necessarily need to be bad and traumatic, but I want to talk from the point of trauma. We're entering the deen that is perfect. We are entering upon a religious apparatus that has the cure for everything that we went through in the past and we will go through. However, who is equipping us and converts to prepare for this? Many might say there's this class, there's that class, read this book. We start learning about Tawheed. We start learning about the seerah of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Some start hearing about politicization, which is a very slippery slope to be hearing about. But that might have been the reason why they came into the deen looking at the geopolitics and the global aspects. But we are still coming, converts, reverts are still coming from somewhere into somewhere. And the stage that we're coming in is a very, very vulnerable stage, Khalid. Now, that's those who are bringing trauma. Yes? And they see the deen can assuage, can alleviate, can help them on various levels with that trauma. But then there are those of us who didn't come with trauma, but become traumatized by the dissonance between the message of the deen and the actuality of those who are Muslims adhering or professing to adhere to the deen. And I'm not making mass takfir here. When I say professing, we're talking about that symbiosis between the deen and the reality of those who adhere to it. So trauma is caused. And if I want to be open and quite frank, my trauma wasn't the same as those who are carrying trauma, who've had traumatic past or all sorts of things they've carried in, psychological abuse, physical abuse, violence, you name it, all sorts. I'm not talking about that. The trauma that I feel many of us faced is when we came into this religion, maybe with rose-tinted glasses, and as converts, reverts, experienced the magnitude of racism and marginalization and diminishing of our self from the wider Muslim populace that we immersed ourselves into. That's a trauma that is seldom spoken about. Now, so imagine those who are bringing trauma, abuse and the violence, everything that you and I have spoken about, and then they come up against a brick wall, a tidal wave of this rejection from the very community who adhere to the deen that they have submitted to completely. Those are levels of trauma following you and meeting you, and you are like the meat in the sandwich in that regard. So, Khalid, I've gone on a bit there to bring that and set that context, and I hand back to you on this.
No. Basically, I could only really echo your sentiment, because as you were going, I was thinking, okay, I know enough brothers like myself who didn't really have a lot of that trauma as their background, but you already encapsulated all that. And those are very serious issues. And how we deal with those issues, I think, is what we need to be really looking at. What are the solutions? Because they're not easy challenges to navigate. You know, that, hey, people, I think obviously the simple short answer is, the better you practice your deen and the more you have iman, then you'll have that brotherhood. But that is not the reality for most. In essence, we can look at even a lot of our brothers and sisters who may have migrated to the West as having a type of trauma too, and being imprisoned through colonial mindsets, being imprisoned by already having these mindsets of racism and so forth, and other challenges, which you'll find in every society as well. That there is this need, and when we look at the seerah of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and how he established the akhuwa, the brotherhood between the Muhajirin wal Ansar, and the more we reflect on the seerah and we see this, we see how important that is. How many of our communities have anything like that for people who convert to Islam, for example, or even people who are new to the community in general? We don't really have that looking out that was the sunnah of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and can help to alleviate a lot of the perhaps help alleviate some of the trauma. Because we can emphasize that trauma, it's there, and it's, and some of the people, they come from various difficult backgrounds. Like I said, I'm talking to brothers that are incarcerated right now. They're they're dealing with issues of, my mother has always hated me and I don't like her. You think, should I be good to her? I said, yeah, do be good to her. Show her that Islam. Keep giving her dawah. He said, well, is that for the sake of Allah? I said, yeah, that's for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just do it for Allah. He said, okay. And so they, people have so many different unique experiences and different types of trauma. But I think we need to really think about what are practical ways we can deal with some of those traumas. We're not going to get rid of racism in totality, but by opening the eyes of some of our brothers and sisters. For example, one of the last times I was in Washington State, I gave several khutbahs, and there was some reverts in the audience I've never seen before, because I don't live there, but I was traveled back and I did several khutbahs and I did a lecture. And then some of the old school reverts from the back in the day happened to be there too. They were grinning from ear to ear. They said, Ahi, what you said was the haqq. We needed to hear it, because I tried to highlight some of our issues. I said, hey, most of you guys are Somali here. You have a family, you have a tribe, you have the support, and it was relative to the lecture. And just trying to establish that brotherhood and also tear the barriers down with the Sharia, saying, hey, no, it's just, this is a trait of Iblis, of the Shaitan, to have these racist sentiments. You have to fight that. Now, you're human. You're going to have your preferences and your prejudices, and we need to distinguish between preference and prejudice and racism and tribalism, but without getting off too many in these terms. But, we have to bring some medicine to that, because as we see some of the other communities that came before us, like the Warthin community, that came from the moving away from the nation to Islam, okay, with a lot of cultural baggage and a lot of mindset issues, but there were some, obviously they had some value as well, because they were thinking, hey, we're not going to depend on, we don't care, immigrant, this and this. We're Muslim. We're from America. We're going to give you American Islam. Okay, no, we don't need this American Islam and this washed out Islam that you're trying to present. But they were also into self-sufficiency and building their community. They didn't necessarily need to go to outsiders, because they came from that regime that the nation and some of the other Black civil rights movements and so forth, that taught everything from Marcus Garvey up until, that self-sufficient, like, okay, we're not asking for acceptance. Like Marcus Garvey, I do believe there's an element, I'm not saying let's embrace Marcus Garvey's philosophy, but there's an element, as he said, coming to the table with, as men. This is what he said. He was like, no, I don't care about, we need a ship. We're going to go immigrate back to Africa. That was his, his thing. But he was very much into self-sufficiency. So I think there's a blend and win that we need to definitely, as reverts, take strong roles in raising up our communities. And this is not to the exclusion, because no one else is going to do it. No one else is going to go out in the streets. So there is that element of coming to the table with strength. And just even without intending that, the fact that I went over and studied and from amongst my peers, so the fact I can come back, I can go to several communities that are very, Cham, which is like a Vietnamese kind of community, or predominantly Somali, or Ethiopian, or Oromo, Tigray, all these various communities that we have, for example, in Washington State, that they have, and the Yemenis as well, they have a general respect for me. So I can navigate. So I have a strength and a role, to provide. And it is important that people who have a like experience as reverts, and maybe even from the cultural background as African Americans and so forth, they see someone like them who is also preaching the deen. So there's a lot of things. I know I opened up a lot of things, but I do think we need to really strongly look at what are the solutions. We have to establish alliances. We're not talking about we need a black masjid or this and that and the other. At the same time, we do need to be active in our communities. And just as a last note, I really love with the brothers. There's brothers in Philly, the Imam Muslim Family Center. Sheikh Mohammed Munir and Sheikh Abu Sajid and Sheikh Ali Davis, they're doing some powerhouse work there. I love, I love what they're doing, and they're teaching their people in that community, they're teaching them in a language they understand. They're teaching them, you know, they're going to them. And so there are those duats now who are doing what they should be doing, is going to their communities, elevating and raising up the people, but not at the exclusion
Right.
you know what I mean? But somebody's got to get in there. If I was, you know, my brothers that are reverts at work, you know, they happen to all be Latino, so they can relate to me. But if I could speak Spanish too, there might be another level of, okay, yeah, we could do this too. Oh, you know, there's brothers from our community too that you know, embraced Islam and they studied what? Oh, let's get this, you know. So there's that relationship. Now,
I think that's important. You've made some very important observations here. And I want to go back to Islam for Europeans, the first statement that you made, because that speaks to what you're saying. And before, keep that up for a moment, please, if you can, Hassan. I think he's made an excellent comment there, and his subsequent one as well. Going back to Warith D. Muhammad, I just finished reading the book yesterday by Mustafa Briggs, Beyond Bilal. Fantastic book about the presence, involvement, influence of Black Muslims prior and post-slavery. He brings a lot of evidence. Excuse me. He speaks about Warith D. Muhammad. He had 100,000 converts from the Nation of Islam. Let me drink. Now, that was, I got a frog in my throat, F1. Now, that was possibly the biggest conversion we've seen and witnessed in the Western world to date. Okay. Yes, as you said, they've had their cultural baggage that they were bringing, but moving to what you said about Imam Ali Davis and the work that they're doing there, that's exactly the point that I think that Islam for Europeans is speaking about. What's happened with converts for too long is that we've moved into an attempt to move into other communities because they were what was there. Okay. And we've met resistance, continue to meet resistance after the initial tokenism. What do I mean by tokenism? White converts, tokenism. Oh, white converts, whatever. Oh, black converts. Oh, were you formerly gangster? Okay, you must have been gangster. So there's this tokenism and stereotype that is placed upon us when we come to the deen. So white Muslim could have been anyone. Okay, you remind us of Jesus. I've heard Muslims say that. Like, what? Okay, okay, stereotype, colonial stereotypes. They see us walk into the masjid, automatically must have been a gangbanger or gangster.
When did you get out, brother? Well, exactly. May Allah help us.
What Islam for European is saying, and I agree with this sentiment, and that wasn't in mind when I became chairman of Brixton Mosque all those years ago. But as a convert-led mosque, we were able to put in place structures to accommodate converts that came into our community, while also facilitating the established Muslims, the North Africans, the Arabs, the South Asians that were coming amongst us. And so I don't think it would be amiss to look at an entity that does exactly what you're saying with the center that you've referred to, that is speaking to its community, because others are not speaking with the same voice, same language, same longevity of commitment to our communities. The psychological trauma that maybe black individuals, black converts coming to the deen have suffered at the hands of the state, the institutionalized racism. And let's be clear here, when we're speaking about the institutionalized racism, at the bottom of that pecking order with regards to who has been subjugated by that system are black people. Now, we have that dilution where we have, and I say it's dilution, other myriad causes and ethnicity saying, we're with you in order to get their voices heard. But there does need to be that focus on the convert community, the needs, and the prospects that converts bring through the duality of our identities as African American, maybe, as British from a UK context, and being Muslim, that we know how it is to straddle both communities by virtue of that duality of our identities. But I want to bring something here as well, and I'm going to read what Islam for Europeans said just a moment. One thing that we do not discuss, and I've been thinking about this, and it would be amazing if there's research there, and I'm sure there is, or that we have our sisters come in on this, is that the trauma of a woman embracing Islam, okay? Again, whatever the, if there is any baggage, or if there are any challenges that she's leaving behind or bringing with her, but one of the things for sure that the Muslim woman is doing, the convert in particular, she's changing her whole dress code. And I'm not saying about donning the black abaya and everything. We've discussed that before, and I don't think that that's a necessary garb in the sense, in the Western sense, culturally, I mean. Yes, the covering, obligatory, we know this. I'm saying just the first initial step of actually wearing hijab. Because there's a trauma behind that. Not trauma that she's being oppressed, no. Contrary to what Orientalists and detractors from Islam are saying. Going from being very visible as a woman, I'm not saying the women went out there naked, but being visible, the casual clothes and wearing skirts to the knees, or to go into covering completely, wearing the hijab. Those who go one step further, niqab, gloves, keeping themselves refined or back in their homes now, because they're understanding that very classical understanding of do not come out in the case of necessity and everything like that. And we know that there's extensions to that understanding from some of the scholars. The point I'm making is that is a traumatic transference journey that is not acknowledged. And as Brother Liam is saying, Jazakallah khair, trauma of change, even the organizational change. When we're talking about organizational change, we've got to get all these gurus in, these individuals to come in and do professional development just to help individuals manage transformative change in an organization. What about a lifestyle? What about a spiritual change, you know, as well as the physical change? So I think when we look at the whole context, some has been addressed, but there's a whole area that hasn't been addressed, Khalid. And I think it's really important to have this conversation. And I know this is the first of many. We're not just going to stop on this one session. We're going to talk about other aspects. So moving on to identity now. When we embrace Islam, I was a British citizen and still am a British citizen. I was black and still am black. Okay. Then we bring on the identity of Islam. What does that now mean? You're a white convert. You were white beforehand. You were American, or you were British, or you European, or you're whatever. And now you've embraced Islam. What does that mean to these other identity constructs that are already in existence? And we hear from Muslims, heritage Muslims, that you should only be Muslim. We see the criticism of us as black Muslims, that you should eschew your blackness. We hear the cry and call from established heritage Muslims that our nationality doesn't count. But then when we look at the history among these established communities, we see not only do they have nationalities, which are constructs, but they have tribal, cultural demarcations that have transferred from Pakistan, that's transferred from whatever parts of Arabia, that may have transferred from other parts of a particular African region or country. But yet we as converts have to eschew everything, even down to our dress sense. So don't get me wrong, Khalid, I'm bringing it now, but we even down to, if we're dressed in what is like, you're wearing a hoodie, I'm wearing jumper, cardigan, we're wearing what is synonymous with where we come from. However, we are told the paradigm for us must be wearing the thobe or the shawar kameez or the cultural attire that were previously alien to us. And don't get me wrong, I know you wear a thobe, I wear a thobe, I love wearing a thobe and everything. But that should not define us and become a uniform of identity. So again, I'm going to put it back to you. You were black before you became Muslim. You were American before you became Muslim. We embraced Islam, and suddenly the trauma that is placed upon us to remove former identities is overwhelming. Right down to, Khalid, as you know, being told to change our names, which we don't need to do if the name's not in conflict with the deen or a name that has a negative connotation. The trauma is real. It's very, very heavy, and it's very, very complex.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There is though all those issues. And again, I think how we navigate that, because unfortunately there becomes a backlash from some of our brothers and sisters who then they become nationalistic. The point is not to follow what our brothers and sisters from Pakistan or India or what have you, and that we have a country. Yes, we have an identity. For me, being African American, as an African American Muslim Salafi, but you are always 1000%, that Islam comes first. So that is where we have to contextualize even all those other things, because that's not what the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala, and they had tribes. We're not saying you throw away your tribe or that you have this, but your true identity, it comes through your iman, because that's the only thing that's going to distinguish you. If I die now and I'm proud, African American, or I say I have native heritage or this and that and the other, that's not going to benefit me at all. It won't have any import, and nor should it be the source, because what I fear from some of my brothers and sisters is they become so to one extreme to where they begin to, become so nationalistic, and then they begin to embrace disbelieving ideologies. Okay. So if you begin to be like the nation and you begin to say, well, yeah, Kanye West, that's really my hero. And these are real. Trust me, these are absolutely real scenarios. This is the problem, because of that alienation, because of those other things they experience. And that's why I really believe Islamic knowledge is that's the well that we have to drink from in order to get that balance, to maintain that balance, to know what is halal, what is haram, what's permissible, what's not permissible. And of course, there is that pressure, but also we take on that. A lot of us, no one really said I had to wear a shalwar kameez, but I wanted to, as a new revert. That was my dress. We like to look smooth with the shalwar kameez, the two-piece with the thing. And then after I traveled to Yemen, you saw me on the corner with the izar and my, and the imama. And then, going to Sardiya, then I was pretty much always in a thobe, and that would have been looked down on to wear an izar in Sardiya. So I think that's you do tend to willingly, a lot of us take that on, of embracing maybe other cultures to the extent of blind following. And I know a brother, he waves his head like this, and he's with Jamaat Tabligh. He's African American. He does this and everything, man. I said, bro, come on. I almost had to smack him and like, wake up, hold up. But this is real. So there's that pressure, but a lot of us, we do take on that. And again, I guess what I'm saying with all of this and what you said is, we just don't want to get so much caught up into our identity or exalting another identity over Islam. Yes, I'm African American, but I can't necessarily march with LGBTQ African Americans that are doing the thing. And this is what happens. We have some of our brothers and sisters, they get so diluted, and it's so much about nationalism and their racial identity and this and that and the other, that they'll do this. I recently did a video, and it was during Ramadan. There was an LGBTQ, it was called a queer iftar, you know. So
Yeah, I
they were
heard
going to
about
break their fast together in Canada. And they were even in there, they had their gay discrimination. Like, this is mainly for our LGBTQ Arab or something, you know, and perhaps Asian background. So I was like, man, even in that, even though you're on falsehood and evil from A to Z, you even added some other letters to it. And then you even added some racism and discrimination from your other queer compadres. So this is again, there is this I think we've got to, yes, we recognize, you know, and birds of a feather may flock together a lot of times, you know, a lot of Palestinian brothers, they're going to be in their community and stuff like that, no problem. But it's when we have this discrimination, it's when we have this hatred, it's when we have this racism. So it's balancing that identity without giving precedence to that identity. At the end of the day, you're a Muslim, and you will marry who you want as a African American Muslim. If she's from Syria, if she's from China, she's Uzbeki, no problem, no issues there. Just know about each other's culture, so you know, for cultural, you know, to make your marriage last. But I think you want to be careful of this, of becoming exclusionary.
I think that's a key point, not to become exclusionary. However, I think I've moved slightly a step back, as you know, where my position is that while not being exclusionary, I think that there is no issue with, for example, I am strong in promoting Black excellence. Okay, I am an advocate for the visibility of Blackness, because of the invisibility that has been there amongst even the Muslim diasporas and society in that particular instance. But if it becomes a nationalism where Blackness is we are better than others and everything, no, that's that, we don't go down that road. It's interesting what you said, and I know, again, I keep referring to, I think it's Islam for Europeans, just made some very pertinent points where he's talking about the izzah of your qawm, of your people. And we see that with the Sahaba, we see that with the Salaf, we see that with the scholars, even today, that you will have, for example, let's refer to some of the Salaf, Khatib al-Baghdadi, you know, we al-Bukhari, we had these individuals with the appellation of where they came from, okay, and as an identity marker, okay, they didn't eschew that, yes. So I feel that in that instance, there is an evidence there to be able to say, I am such and such from this region. We hear Ahmed Nigeri, Muhammad Falastini, and there's a pride in that, but not a pride, a kibba, where it's above the deen. So what you're saying is in its point, and I think in that instance there, the crown has got to be Islam. I don't get me wrong, I really do agree. The crown has to be Islam, but I believe that these other existing identities merge with all of that. As Allah has told us in Surah Al-Hujurat, ayat 13, we say often that He made us into tribes and nations that we may know each other. Allah tells us, I've made you into tribes and nations that you may know each other. Then He gives the criteria. The best of you, coming back to your point about deen, is the one who has the most taqwa, God consciousness. So there's no color, tribe, ethnicity that's there that Allah's looking at in that instance. But as well, Allah has not negated, from that very ayah, has not negated that. We know there are strong admonitions from the Prophet ﷺ about the one who boasts about lineage. We know that. So I'm agreeing with you in that instance, but I'm saying as well, the visibility of our other identities, as Islam, I think for European, others have said, Black, British and Muslim. Muslim, Black and British. Muslim, British and Black. These are all part of my mosaic. And I'm not going to diminish any aspect of those. But we have been told to do that. We've been encouraged to do that as converts when we've come into the deen. And this is a problem because it goes back to the title of what we're saying, in the sense of who are we as an identity? Who are we when we come into the deen? How do we address the varying aspects of our identity when we embrace Islam? How do we project and portray ourselves to these individuals? Because the interesting point, what you've said is many of us went through that. The changes in the garments, appearance. Some of us were dressing like the Tuareg with the turbans and wearing the kohol in the eyes and coming out. Our neighbors were like, oh, well, you were wearing a suit yesterday and now you're dressing in that particular way. And it goes back to those first two early stages that I mentioned, the founding stage and the youthful stage, both being idealistic and impressionable in that particular instance. I didn't wear shawak kameez. I just hasten to throw that one in there.
I like it, but
mashallah. But
I
no,
might even still give me some more, but I really like it.
I know many who did, mashallah. But what I'm saying in that instance is that also what we know about identity is that when you assume another identity, it reflects a weakness on your own in that instance. I'm not saying you. This is the perception, okay? It assumes that the culture that you're going into, that you're embracing, you are acknowledging the weakness of your own culture. And I think this is an important point to discuss this, Khalid, because that's not what we should be doing. I think the cultural backdrops that are not contradictory to Islam amongst blackness, amongst whiteness, I'm talking about converts in this instance, Hindus as well, brownness in that instance, Chinese on this occasion, have got cultural mores and platforms that are complementary to Islam. What do I mean by complementary? There's no conflict and there's an enhancement of these cultural aspects when we embrace Islam. Yes, it reflects inferiority. You're right, Liam. This is what I'm speaking about. So when we embrace the deen, those cultural characteristics are enhanced by Islam. So we should not be looking to assimilate or take on any other culture. We did not see that from the Sahaba. We don't see that from the scholars, unless they've gone and moved and embedded themselves amongst a community. Again, Liam's bringing some really points. Islam is a filter. Islam provides that context. Islam is that parameter within which to bring these cultural elements, cultural characteristics. But converts are not told this. We are not told this. And that's when you start seeing psychological issues come in with regards to belonging. We embrace the deen, and my research here, if I go to the chapter of my research, attraction to Islam, 30% came to the deen due to Tawheed of my interviewee cohort. 50% embraced because of what? Islam as a way of life, brotherhood. That was the biggest percentage. 10% embraced because they saw there was no contradiction in the deen. It's pure and simple. Hear this now, still a big factor. 10% embraced Islam due to the traumatic experience which precipitated soul searching. 10%. The biggest amount being brotherhood. So Tawheed being 30%. I'm repeating it here now. So the point is here, in embracing the deen, yes, some want a spiritual cleansing. Some of us want to move away from a past that was stifling for us, not knowing the meaning of life and everything like that. But not everyone. We don't all have that that Christian narrative of why they became, that Christian conversion narrative. I was blind and poor and my life was miserable and then I became a Christian. We don't do that as Muslims. Some had that traumatic experience. Others was like Tawheed, Islam, the brotherhood. As Liam is saying, yes, pain and suffering and all of its manifestations, we cling to Allah's Tawheed. That is the lifeline. Hold fast to the rope of Allah and do not be divided. So again, belonging. Many came for the brotherhood and didn't find it. Reactionary saying, I don't know about the statistics, reactionary, but it is a large number that some convert for marriage love. I'm wondering, are you talking about the man has met the woman and needs to convert, or are you saying that they've converted because they see the institution of marriage and the preservation of marriage and everything. I don't know if it's one of the two or both that you're speaking to, reactionary, but yes, some convert for love and for marriage in that instance. But again, we've gone through step by step. The paper that I'm quoting, Dr. Shireen, is my PhD, and it was when I passed it, it went into a book, Extremists in Our Midst, Confronting Terror, Palgrave Macmillan. So it's been published as a book now, so I'm quoting from my research here. And there are other research since then and prior to mine, which speak to similar things in this regard. I'm happy to share the link with you, or even if I think I can send a PDF if you want to share your number with the host, the invigilator, Dr. Brother Hassan, and then I can see if I can send you a PDF of that, inshallah. So the belonging aspect, Khalid, when we look at it, if we were to do some in-depth research amongst the convert community, I think we'd find, because you alluded to it earlier on, and yes, that's a phrase I've not seen for 2 decades now. Let the sunnah go forth and don't stop it. Jazakallah khair, something servant. But if we were to do research, I think we would find among many reverts, converts, that the sense of belonging was either superficial, stunted, or they didn't find it according to the perceptions that they had when they embraced the deen. Hear me carefully. The sense of belonging, you've talked about Ramadan. There's a group, mashallah, tabarakallah, that brothers and sisters encouraged me to start when I came back to the UK. And I don't know if I told you, Khalid, I think you know I'm back in the UK anyway, mashallah.
Yeah, right.
In that, we discussed it. We looked at the fear that some converts have as Ramadan approaches. The fear is heightened when it approaches Eid, because there is an absence of belonging. And any community that says, no, we're putting on an event, apart from the convert communities, that is, we're putting on an event for the converts, that's tokenistic. Because the fear is, once that heightened iman in Ramadan has gone, the harsh reality of being alone, and being alone not just amongst the Muslim community, Khalid, being alone from the society which you left when you embraced Islam. You've got that double whammy effect now, that you've got rejection from family, from friends. You may not be able to work because you've changed your physical appearance. The sister's wearing hijab now. She may be wearing niqab and everything now. And so he or she are no longer acceptable in the way they were pre-conversion. Neither are they truly accepted and embraced by the Muslim communities that they've moved into post-conversion. So notice, one of the things I want you to look at here, and I know you can see this, Carly, because we've talked about rebirth, we've talked about trauma, we're talking about challenges of identity and belonging. We're going through all, because each of these, mashallah, you were the one who had the series of lectures, and I brought it all into one with this title. All of these are aspects. We're talking about it now. There needs to be a pragmatic plan, as you said earlier at the outset, a solution to addressing this. And one of the ways that I looked at addressing this, Khalid, when I did the Fajr Club, you remember, with Dr. Akil, our brothers and brother Nafis, about a year ago.
Right. Yeah.
And what I then did is that 4-stage cognitive framework, I applied it to communities. And I said it's important to see what stage the community is in. Is it a new community in its infancy? Is it at stage 2? Because that will impact on the converts that join. It will impact on the converts that actually join that community. So if that community is at its infancy and someone is coming in at stage 1 with them, it can be a really exciting time, because everyone's on similar levels and skill sets are similar, experiences are similar, but there's a danger there, because everything is abstract, everything is ideal. You need to have maturity of knowledge, of age, of experience in such a community. I'll hand over to you.
You covered quite a bit of thing, as I think Rabbi Zidni Elman is mentioning, that we are in a stage, we realize our problems, and highlighting our problems is very important. But no doubt we need to be, uh, gathering together solutions. And I think I really see it will need to be on a micro level. And that's why I point to, like, for example, that's just one example. And I'm sure in every, in revert communities throughout, especially America and so forth, you have models and examples like this of students of knowledge and others from their home, from those people coming back and delivering
Right.
and raising up those communities. So that's one very, very critical component. Another uh, component or issue that, or I should say, perhaps a solution, is there does need to be that model of the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam with the Sahaba radiyallahu ta'ala majma'in, where there's that initiating a brotherhood for new Muslims, because new Muslims, they are very delicate, dealing with a lot of things. As I said, it could have that past baggage, could be emotional trauma, violence, whatever else, and or just the difficulty of just becoming a Muslim and the changes in lifestyle change, family change, all of those kind of things. It's always important, as one of the sisters mentioned, being a track coach and something like this, that still the bottom line is keep your Muslim identity. So don't come out of that hijab thinking that that's I got to go with the cultural norm. Keep that hijab and keep that keep your role as a Muslimah, and try to do whatever you're doing, or I guess if it's your job or what have you. That's very important. But we need our brothers and sisters, I guess, by highlighting these issues in some of our greater communities. When you have the role, if you're doing lectures, and that's what some of the things that I've been trying to do when I go back, when I'm in a position to do lectures and stuff like this, is highlighting some of those issues that, hey, we face as reverts, and not to allow the cultural identities to supersede. So, because that is what helps to, that is a highlighting that issue, so to prevent alienation. For example, during Ramadan, I gave a few small little talks, and predominantly the community, they were all professionals. They were, I won't say secular, but it was kind of like that kind of community, but they had me speak. So that was good. I had the microphone. So I was able to highlight, even though there was only a few reverts, and I literally said it. I said, there's 1, 2, 3, there's only 3 of us. I said, we have a duty. Most of us came, let's be honest, we made hijrah for the dunya, this and that and the other. We have to be as brothers. We have to. It's not our choice. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, innamal mu'minun ikhwa. Verily, the believers are brothers. So there is that highlighting those issues with our greater community, but I think we have a huge role as those that are still have remained Muslim from amongst our peers, because I've seen a lot of my peers, especially from where I'm from, who left Islam, especially the sisters, that we have a role to be that gap, and reach out and make sure the people are being cared for from our community. Because the bottom line is, most people are not going to, but we can emphasize and put the pressure that, hey, we're a brotherhood, we need to embrace, but we have to have that role. We have to teach and help to raise up. And that's a position of power. No one else is going to give you, as I saw a couple comments about Izzah and things like this, on honor. No one really gives you honor. Honor is something you earn, your honor, your respect, or your position, because they respect you, because they see you coming with something as a source of power, or a source of quwwah, that you have this honor, you have this as when you respect someone, even in the workplace or something, even if they're a different faith and they're different, this and this, and you respect them because you see their, maybe they earn their respect, hopefully, or whatever, they have some attributes. So it's very important for us to raise those attributes in our children, in our communities. And, so I think it's a multi-pronged approach it isn't having Black history classes in the regular masjid. I don't think so. That's the parents' duty to teach you your identity and to teach you the honor that, hey, don't look down on yourself. And I know some people that have, you'll see it kind of a difference with certain communities and certain peoples who came like from the nation and then they became Muslim and Salafi and what have you. You can see they didn't have those issues of self-hatred as much and stuff, because they were taught even before Islam, they had a strong identity that, hey, you're a person of value. You are, although they had their nationalism and stuff like this, and they had their extremism and their, their lies on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and all their kufr and so forth. But the whole point is those identities are things you have to really primarily teach in the home, as far as teaching your children to be, to, I guess, know their culture and know who they are, and in relation to the society and so forth. Yes, you can have classes you want to emphasize in the masjid and so forth, certain things, but we have to, as he says, the nationalism and stuff, we have to be cautious about that, because that is, when we come to real nationalism, it's a type of kufr.
No, just okay. I have one thing to interrupting at that point. Everything you said, I'd say is on point. However, there's another element that would speak about. Sister wanted a point mentioned, and I'll mention that because it's not just an experience that's familiar to Salafi publications, S-pubs. I think it's there are other entities that this can happen to, even communities with no name. She's saying when she first came to Islam, she nearly left Islam due to them. Others have left because of the interrogative aspect. And when a sister, again, sisters coming to the deen are visibly changing who they are. Okay, there's trauma with that. We've got to understand that. So anything else that is being thrown at brothers, that's thrown at sisters, it's going to impact to a different degree as well. I think what is also important, Khalid, on top of everything that you've said, what we see a lot is when brothers and sisters, converts come in with trauma, with challenges, identity, low iman, the fear that our sister said she has, that she loves Ramadan, but then she just quickly goes and prays and then comes back and goes to sleep and everything like this. What we've got to understand is that there is a time and a place for administering the medicine. A doctor may tell you if you have medication at this particular point, it won't be effective. It may harm you. Take it in these doses at this particular time. What am I moving on to? What am I intimating here? So many times we see the established communities, and even from the more established convert communities, speaking to brothers and sisters who have challenges, prescriptively quoting Quran, Hadith, Sunnah, statements of the Salaf. They've become memes now. Now, I'm not discarding that, Khalid, but I come back to the doctor and medicine analogy. There's a time and place for that. When we look at the Sahaba, and you gave the example of the Ansar and the Muhajirun coming together, we didn't see, yes, the revelation was in motion. It was being revealed at that time, mashallah, tabarakallah. But we didn't see reminders of every time of Quran, Sunnah, Hadith. And I'm not saying that we don't need to give reminders. What I'm saying in this instance is there's a time and a place. Sometimes you need to meet. Often we need to meet our brothers and sisters where they are. Where they are.
But that's Quran and Sunnah.
No, wait, let me clarify, Khalid. You
say, but Quran and Sunnah, as you mentioned, that's a part of revelation. The revelation wasn't revealed all at once. It was
Khalid, let me explain.
People based on
let me explain. No one is saying not the Quran and Sunnah.
No, but I just want to emphasize that, because some of those al-fadh you were saying, some of the statements, they, I think they needed a little jarring and a little adjustment.
I will clarify. I will continue to
clarify. Go ahead.
As I've said to you, the Quran and Sunnah is with us. It's there. It's established. But when a brother's coming to you and he has distress, low faith, low iman, okay, And there's a time when you can start bringing in Quran and Sunnah, but you need to know where he's at that particular moment in time, because in you quoting Quran and Sunnah at that particular point in time, his ears might switch up, close down, his heart might switch up, because I've heard all this before and it's not working for me. And it's not because the Quran and Sunnah isn't working, it's because he's not receptive to it because of his condition. So there needs to be an approach where we know or are ready to meet the person where they're at. So I'll give you an example. Sister was online to me. She reached out from one of the social media outlets, married, doing tahajjud, praying, doing all the du'as. Yet she said to me, I'm suicidal. I was like, subhanallah. I was thinking, how? And what I didn't do, how are you reciting Quran, doing tahajjud late at night? You've got beautiful children, you're married and everything's going well, and yet you're suicidal. Itakile sister. No. Didn't do that. And I'm not saying I'm the example. I'm far from it. But what I try to do is say, okay, I need to listen where she is now. So I said, can you explain to me why you're feeling this way? Does your husband know? Yes, he does. He doesn't mind her reaching out. I said, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a scholar in this regard and everything. She says, no, I've seen the lectures you've done and what you did, the podcast. What can I do? And I said, I need to ask you, what do you want to do? If you're doing all of this, then this should be helping you. This should be aiding you. I was able to say that because she was doing that level of ibadah. Others I've spoken to, brothers who were not doing ibadah, okay? I've had to see where they're at, what the focus is that they're at the particular moment in time, and move with them incrementally to the point that when you start referring them to Quran, to Sunnah, it's as though they're saying, we didn't even read this ayah in the way that we're reading it now. No, it's your condition. You've read it, but your condition is such, and this is the speech of Allah, which is perfect. We can read it 10 times, and it will mean different things as we are growing with regards to our faith and everything. We've got to take this into consideration. And the Quran and Sunnah, of course, Khalid, 2 men came to the Prophet ﷺ, and one of them said, what will happen if I kill such and such? Prophet ﷺ said, Anar. The other one came, what it said, if I kill such and such? He didn't say Anar. He gave a slightly different answer. And the Sahaba was like, why? Why did you speak in this particular way? And the Prophet ﷺ gave a context to it. Context is important when we are giving Quran and Sunnah. I remember, I think it was Sheikh Al-Albani who said this, and I'll hand back to you shortly, that our neighbors, the right of the neighbors upon us, including the non-Muslim neighbors, if we think that by just pushing Quran and Sunnah on them, and they say he was aggressive, he was impatient with me with it, and it made me have disdain towards what he was saying and the message he was saying to me. And from what I remember, Sheikh Al-Albani said the person who was the purveyor of that message of Quran and Sunnah or Deen, in the way that he was carrying the dawah, could be blameworthy. So the point I'm making is, yes, Quran and Sunnah, but we need to meet the individuals where they are, and communities are not doing that. And they're not having the sustainability with those individuals. It's like, I've been advising them for 6 months, and here she comes again, here he comes again. Coming back to that sister who's suicidal, I was able to say to her, what's clear to me from the dialogue that we've been having is that you're doing all of this ibadah and you're expecting a response from Allah immediately. I said, Allah doesn't work like that in every instance, sister. You need to give it up to Allah and keep worshipping with the ikhlas that you say that you have. And you need to make sure you keep worshipping sincerely. Your problems may not go, but Allah has something in store for you. And Allah's timing is like none other. My brother, I hadn't heard from her for a few weeks and whatever. Then she suddenly sent a message. She goes, I feel much better now, that I shouldn't be looking for instant gratification when I go to our Lord. I said, alhamdulillah, because that's not what our Lord is. It's not like, I'm thirsty, I'm going to get a coffee to quench my thirst. I'm hungry, I'm going to eat a bar of chocolate to quench my craving. Do not approach Allah in this way. So I'm not saying I'm the perfect example, Khalid, but I'm trying to say, yes, we're both saying Quran and Sunnah, but I'm saying is that there is a way to deal with converts who sometimes may be repelled because of, we don't want to hear that at this point in time now. But brother, you should be conditioned. You should have a condition that we always want to hear the Quran and Sunnah. Verily, when the soul finds rest, the heart finds ease when the Quran is recited. But it doesn't happen to some people. So do we keep doing that to them? And we see, hold on, they're going further and further. They're actually hating what we're saying to them now. How can they be hating? It's the book of Allah. We need to see where they are and meet them there and bring them back to Quran and Sunnah. And I'm putting this out, Khalid, to those communities that are doing this with converts, who feel that experience.
Yeah. Jazakallah khairan. So I think it's very important for us to realize. So I guess it's in what we're saying, that when I say the Quran and Sunnah, I'm saying the Quran and Sunnah covers everything you said. I'm saying that, for example, the word hikmah, that the Arabs use, hikmah, that this means, wada shay fi mawdu'i, that you're putting everything in its proper place. So that is Quran and Sunnah. So what you've said, that's the only real issue I had with what you said, is just the caution with the alfad. The Quran and Sunnah, it's still the Quran and Sunnah. And on the similar note, literally this week, without going too much exposed, I was called from a different city with the exact same issue, a sister, but she comes from an immigrant community. She got my number somehow, called me and said, my daughter wants to kill herself. And I talked to her up tonight, all the way to Fajr, and I don't know what to do. Quran and Sunnah, I said, well, this is not a religious problem necessarily. When we hear suicide, we need to deal with this is a psychological issue. We need to go to a counselor. You need professional help. That's what I said. Let me see about my contacts. I do know a Muslim counselor in that thing who's a social worker, and I didn't even realize his credentials, that he can't prescribe medicine, but he is a psychiatrist or whatever, a good friend of mine, one of my close companions. So I got on the phone with him, gave her that solution. So all I'm saying, as far as all the what you were saying, where there was no disagreement, I just didn't like that we're not, the Quran and Sunnah is not just throwing ayat at people. So I want people to understand that. That's what I want to emphasize, is that it's not that, as we've talked about many times, practical tawheed, implementing tawheed and stuff like this. So it's not just simply we just read ayat and you have to fear Allah, like someone suffering from pornography. You got to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No, we do talk to them and so forth. But I'm saying that even that discussion, it is Quran and Sunnah. The Quran and Sunnah gives us that ability to make those approaches, to deal with the people where they're at. So I deal with this all the time. I deal with brothers. They come to me during Ramadan. Several brothers, they said, I've missed. I'm gonna be straight up with you. This week I didn't even pray. And I'm going through it. And also I sometimes don't eat halal because I have to be swole, because here it could be life or death. I could be praying and someone could roll up on me. If I got a little size on me, they're going to respect me a little bit more. And that's just life in here. And I said, you're right. That is life in here. But I'm not saying it's halal for you not to do that. I said, get some peanuts and some peanut butter from your people, have them put it on your commissary, whatever it takes, get on those push-ups. I said, trust me, you do 500 push-ups a day, they're going to respect you. Okay. So anyway, the point is we do meet people where they are. So I didn't blast the brother and say, Allah says, but I did. SubhanAllah, one of the brothers came to me after a little while, because I did say, in a way, with wisdom, hopefully, that, the Prophet ﷺ said, "Men taraka salat faqad kafara." Whoever leaves the prayer has disbelieved. So I didn't say, you're a kafir. No, I said, be very careful, akhi. So it shows us that this is very a serious, dangerous situation. I don't care if you're smoking weed. I don't care if you're taking Suboxone. I don't care if you're doing this and this and this. Never give up the prayer. That's your relationship with Allah. So I broke it down so he could understand it. And then he said, akhi, this is the most I've been praying, since, I've been coming with you and stuff like this. This is the most I've been praying since I've ever been a Muslim. I said, alhamdulillah, may Allah bless you and bless you to be firm. I said, whatever you do, keep on that.
So what you've emphasized, which is really important, there's a difference there. So I think we're agreeing, but I'm still
we're agreeing. I guess I want to say one thing. It's so important. It's a little off because someone had mentioned about intercultural marriage. So this is a little off topic, but it was related to kind of what we were talking about before.
what you've shown, and this is the example for everyone who's looking at this. What you've shown, which is not always shown, Khalid, and we know there are communities and co-religions who do this. When we're conveying Quran and Sunnah, you've used the term hikmah. We are conveying something precious, weighty, valuable. So we should not use that as a yardstick and be dismissive with it. Like, oh, I've established the proof on them, and if they don't follow the proof, may Allah guide them or break their back. And we this is not the way in the context of the lay people, even the ulama. So my point is the same. What you're saying, there's a care and a caution that we need to convey that, and there's a timing. You've given an example of the sister that you're speaking about, her daughter. This is what I want to emphasize. This is not happening in generality in many communities. And I think moving on towards the conclusion, there's another aspect that I think that's really important that we can't miss out on. And I don't know about your experience in the States, but I think it's something we need to look at. Again, converts bringing in, subhanAllah, Brother Liam's mentioned it right now. I was just about to talk about this. Converts come into the deen with trauma, or they don't come with trauma, but the trauma of embracing the deen, the excitement starts wearing down, and we're firm. Yes, we're Muslims and everything, but then we start experiencing problems within the deen, post-conversion. And when we approach the communities with those issues, whether they're pre-existing, I'm going to jump back again, so I'm going backwards and forwards, before Islam or in Islam, we are met with a blanket of silence and an inability for us to get compounded, comprehensive advice and counseling. The reason being that we realize amongst some of the communities that we're in, they've had these problems, and far worse, sexual abuse, domestic abuse, these sorts of things. But the way they deal with it is to bury it as if it didn't exist. And we come to that realization when either we've experienced the same or similar problems, and we're trying to get help from within the Muslim community, and then we realize they can't help us because they've got a culture of subversion, daughters being raised, not having been abused, but not being able to bring that out because they will not be able to be married within the community. It will be shame on the family and such and such and such. So where does that leave the convert who's coming, the sister, who's then faced domestic abuse, violence, misogyny, rape within marriage, when she's married into a cultural community, or she's married a convert? We're not going to cast aspersions on all of the heritage communities, but they realize the communities I'm in cannot help me because they have not helped themselves in this historic problem. That's another aspect that really throws converts, and it compounds that sense of disillusionment and lack of belonging. Have you experienced that in the States? Because it's happened in the UK.
Absolutely. I think it's around the world. It's even in Saudi and in the Muslim countries, they have that, but they just have they have the infrastructure to where they can address those issues. I mean, I'm not saying specifically for reverts, but yeah, we have this on a greater scale, probably I would think, than the UK even. These same issues, but I think some of that comes down to the lack of infrastructure, mental health infrastructure, counseling. Because now we are, a lot of for example, our brothers and sisters who've migrated, they're a part of that system, and they're finding their children in gangs, in prison. Now I hear in Washington State, you're going to have a huge percentage of Muslim youth that are in the prisons. My man always tells me about the drug abuse and so forth of many of our cultural brothers and sisters from this country and that country, out of this one, African, this. They're going through the same thing. and also the internal rape. So we have that as well, obviously dealing with those issues as reverts. And I think a lot of that, we don't have currently, especially in America, a large scale way of dealing with the trauma that people are experiencing, our youth are experiencing, and the youth being traumatized, being involved in gangs and stuff. We're having killings left and right, and that's happening to the migrant communities now, especially those who are closer to like African American and a lot of our youth and Hispanic youth, those who are closer to them. So they're experiencing the same issues of the gangs and the gang violence and the killings and the drugs and the on and on and on. So the communities now realize they need this, but we're still a long way away from having Muslim mental health professionals who deal with things, with Quran and Sunnah in mind, and not just a secular mindset. Because you have a lot of professionals, well educated from Pakistan and India, that are, I'm a psychologist and I'm a psychiatrist, and their deen is shot out. If we're going to be honest, that's the nicest way we can say about it. Their deen, they don't. No, Freud said this, and so on. Pavlov's experiment was this, and they'll give you all this quotes of this, but they will never give you a little bit of Ibn al-Qayyim to know that we need that spiritual component too, that you need that. So I think this comes down to, we see the need there, but it will become, maybe in the future, we hope, in the development of our communities, and maybe we can do that on micro levels, that you have these mental health professionals in our community to deal with that, because those are real issues, especially as reverts. We have a lot, especially in certain communities, a lot of sisters and brothers who came from serious trauma, like serious, like, okay, yeah, my father, my uncle, my grandfather, they all were, akramakumullah, abusing me physically. And now I'm a sister, and now I want to get married. She wants to get married, or she was just shot out, doing all kind of crazy stuff, as well as the brothers. So they are now favored with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's deen. How do you deal with that? So that's a whole nother.
And Khalid, on top of that,
one thing I want to quickly say, because I wanted to hit somebody's question. Somebody said about intercultural marriages. Well, the bottom line is, we've seen all the marriages failing on a high level. And what I say to people when they are going to when they're going to marriage, and what I usually intercultural, I mean, like, she's from Morocco, he's African American, he's a white revert or convert, and she's from Syria, and they're overseas and stuff. That's what I mean. Not usually within the context of America, unless they're still really deeply in their culture. That an important component for the success of that is to have a respect and understanding of one another's culture. If I marry a Somali sister, then I have a little bit of knowledge about some of their cultural things and even cultural problems. Okay, as Somalis, we help one another. So if there's a problem in the tribe, hubby, I kind of expect, or it's a relative, you kind of got to throw down. It's a cultural thing. You should have some knowledge about these things. And also, hey, I like to, you might hear me rapping in the house. It's only going to be in the house. That's, I'm not giving you music, but I'm just kicking you a little flavor from back in the day. Don't get it twisted and say, I'm like this and this and that and the other. No, this is in our house between me and you. And this is how I like to have fun. Let's joke. Let's have fun in our home and so forth. Don't get scared to death holding your breath. And that happens too. So so that's what I would say as far as the cultural component, is that realizing that we're human beings. We do have a background. That doesn't, you don't have to shun my background, and I don't have to shun your background. But at the same time, just be aware of that. If you marry, I know a brother, and he's more from kind of the hood, and had that experience. He married I think a Caucasian sister in the UK, so he's an African American who had certain experiences, and she said that she went, it got so bad between them that she called him the N and things like this. So this kind of thing is completely unacceptable. And I know a lot of stories like this. Somali married a Saudi woman flipping out at some point, wanted divorce and called him a slave, or, these kind of things. This is the ugly sickness of racism. Okay, if you're my woman, wherever you're from, you've shared some intimate things. I'm never going to transgress that bound and say, well, you're just a white girl from Europe, or you're just the, you know, this is horrible. So this is horrible. And this shows people have a lack of deen. So that's why I'm saying the deen component is there. But we have a, I know we've talked, we've been all over the scale, but I just wanted to address that person's comment that intercultural marriage, there's no problem with that. That's Islam. And that is knowing those different tribes. If you want to marry a sister from your tribe, no problem. And if you want to marry outside that, and as men, hey, you can have 4 if you have the ability. So go ahead and get a little flavor from around the world, but just go in there with knowledge and understanding that, hey, okay, she has this cultural background. This one has this cultural background. Oh, I understand you guys do things like this. This is from the deen. This is not from the deen. I want you also to know this is how we do it. You know, we got our soul food here, you know, whatever. So that's something I wanted to highlight.
No, I'll jump in there. No, I understand. Jazakallah, Dr. Shireen mentioned and confirmed exactly what you're saying. And in case anyone thinks that there's a bit of misogyny or patriarchy coming in there, I think when we're talking about different flavor, we're talking about cultural flavors in that sense, making it very, very clear, because I know how people jump on that. He said different flavors from around the world, 4 wives. No, brothers and sisters and non-Muslim guests. It wasn't meant in the context that you have put the worst construction on. But there's another aspect, Khalid, and we'll conclude.
Well, it's nothing wrong if it's different, not just different culture, but different races. It could be different colors, could be whatever.
Yeah, no, I know.
Khalid, I don't know exactly. Maybe I was a little bit behind in understanding that negative connotation. So anyway, go ahead. Now,
as we go to conclusion, some of the other challenges, and I think it's important to touch upon this. What we're seeing as well is some who are coming, there's the trauma of those who went through gender transformations prior to Islam. And I'm speaking about something that I came across when I was chairman of Brixton in the 90s. An individual was coming to one of my wives' at the time study circles, and as they grew on the Sunnah, they were feeling guilt, and they spoke to my wife, and she came to me and said, what can they do? The individual did this before. This is when transgender wasn't a big thing out there and everything like that. I'm putting this out there because there's got to be an understanding and approaches, challenges. So they said that they felt really bad. This is how they'd felt all their lives. So they'd done the transformation when before Islam, but now they're Muslim and it's been irreversible, and they've been living the life as a woman. They were coming, niqab, abaya, everything like that. So what I did, I said, I need to get advice. And yes, it is traumatic for many reactionary, for the men as well. Those of us who've had 3 wives and everything, even though it's a blessed experience and I loved it. But we men do go through some trauma if we have 3 or 4 wives as well. But you know what?
Traumatic, but there's also many successful things.
Yeah,
no.
So no, I'm saying from a successful point as well. Yeah. I'm saying from a successful point as well. There can be trauma while there's success. Of course. Coming back to the story, so I went to one of the scholars in Jordan, Sheikh Ibrahim Shakra at the time, and asked for advice how, because the individual wanted to know how should they be dealt with in the community, what should they do? And his advice in that specific occasion was unique, and it was conveyed back to the individual. And he bought the ayat or bought the statement that what was past has gone, okay, except that everything that was past has gone, and that this individual should be treated as a sister, that Allah forgives all except that shirk is committed with him in that regard. So he said, let the individual continue to come to the study circles. It was my wife's at the time. This is not something to advertise openly so that the individual gets chastised, whatever. However, if this individual wanted to get married, they would need to declare to the individual from the outset everything, and that they can't have children, and then leave it up to the individual in this regard. And this individual was formerly married, but in the new state or transformation that they were in. But the point I'm making is these are some of the realities that are going to enter with individuals coming with aspects of trauma.
Of course.
And there's got to be a maturity and an ilm, a knowledge in how they're dealt with. I don't know if it's happened anymore. I'm only dealing with an experience in the 90s when I was chairman for
there's a lot of experiences, especially now. But
Right.
yeah,
Okay.
we've
There
had
you go.
experience.
So,
Yeah,
there you go. So
yeah.
the point is now, some might say, no, how can they this, that, some harsh treatment, everything like that. No, 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 no. Each thing and circumstance needs to be dealt with. We know the position of Islam and all of this. So we don't need to go into that now. We know the position about Islam in this instance. But what about those individuals who have come from a particular lifestyle, have realized the truth of Islam, entered the deen, and are now in such conflict because they've realized the magnitude of what they've done under the Sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Well, I want to highlight what you did, which was good, very important, is you asked the people of knowledge about that, and then the Sheikh gave that. Yeah, and we've had a similar situation to that. And I sorry to cut you off, but also I just wanted to piggyback off that. Another experience, a brother who's also incarcerated contacted me, and he said, how do we deal with, there's certain guys, this guy, he prays with us, he wants to pray with us, but he's gay and this and that and the other. I said, he said, do we make takfir of him? And I said, no, you're wrong. I said, anybody can accept Islam and worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is sinful. Okay. This person is sinful, whether it's a woman who likes other women and this and that and the other, or a man who likes other men. This is sinful. We don't get around that. As you mentioned, hukm wadih, it's clear. However, we want that person to remain a Muslim. And that's not really in our hand or our choice. That is your Muslim brother. Now you want to try to help them. And this is where we need those infrastructures to deal with people who have that kind of trauma, because most of us are not equipped. I'm not equipped. I would probably, if someone confided in me, I wouldn't jump on them and beat them up. I'd say, listen, I want you to know that this is sinful. I'm not going to share your business out there, but you need to work on that. And honestly, I'm not equipped to do
likewise.
Much. I can't do the therapy that's going to make you like women, because I don't have that issue, alhamdulillah. But it's a difficult, those are just new challenges, because again, they have a right to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as you mentioned the ayat earlier, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Inna Allah la yaghfiru an yushraka bihi wa yaghfiru ma duna dhalika liman yasha. Verily, Allah doesn't forgive that you commit shirk with him, but he forgives other than that for whomsoever he pleases. And that, again, that's talking about if you died upon shirk. So if you committed shirk now and you made tawbah, alhamdulillah, inshallah ta'ala, it's forgiven by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So just to put that out there.
No,
I know we've already done an hour and a half, so I'm going to leave it.
We have, and I think I hope we've done some justice to the subject. It's a huge one, many layers to it. And I want to thank the brothers and sisters, non-Muslim guests, Paul Commins, who was talking about what's happened with his son. I don't know if Hassan still got that there to put up, and we didn't read it out, but very heartwarming story about the change in his son and what's happened with him. Yeah, Robert Cummins, sorry. Robert, for sharing this with us, and may Allah bless you and your son and keep you safe, secure, and stronger each day in Iman. Ameen. 1.5 years off medication, mashallah. We will conclude until 2 weeks, and we look forward to speaking and engaging with you all again. This has been the Doctor's Lab. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Barakallahu feekum.